Hello everyone, welcome to Study Vibes Academy. This is the audiobook of chapter 14, Breathing and Exchange of Gases. So let's start. As you have read earlier, oxygen is utilized by the organisms to indirectly break down simple molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, etc. to derive energy to perform various activities. Carbon dioxide, which is harmful, is also released during above catabolic reactions. It is therefore evident that oxygen has to be continuously provided to the cells and CO2 produced by the cells have to be released out. This process of exchange of oxygen from the atmosphere This process of exchange of oxygen from atmosphere with CO2 produced by the cells is called breathing, commonly known as respiration. Place your hands on your chest. You can feel the chest moving up and down. You know that it is due to breathing. How do we breathe? The respiratory organs and the mechanism of breathing are described in the following sections of this chapter. Respiratory organs. Mechanism of breathing vary among different groups of animals depending mainly on their habitats and levels of organization. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelacanths, flatworms, etc. exchange oxygen with CO2 by simple diffusion over their entire body surface. Earthworms use their moist cuticle. Insects have a network of tubes, tracheal tubes, to transport atmospheric air within the body. Special vascularized structures called gills, bronchial respiration, are used by most of the aquatic arthropods and mollusks, whereas vascularized bags called lungs, pulmonary respiration, are used by the terrestrial forms for the exchange of gases. Among vertebrates, fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals respire through lungs. Amphibians, like frogs, can respire through their moist skin, cutaneous respiration. Human respiratory system. We have a pair of external nostrils opening out above the upper lips. It leads to a nasal chamber through the nasal passage. The nasal chamber opens into the pharynx, a portion which is the common passage for food and air. The pharynx opens through the larynx region into the trachea. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which helps in sound production, hence called the sound box. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra into a right and left primary bronchi. Each bronchi undergoes repeated divisions to form the secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles. Bronchioles ending up in very thin terminal bronchioles. The trachea, primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled and vascularized bag-like structures called alveoli. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli comprises the lungs. We have two lungs which are covered by a double-layered pleura with pleural fluid between them. It reduces friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lung surface. The part starting with the external nostril up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part. whereas the alveoli and their ducts form the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. The conducting part transports the atmospheric air to the alveoli, clears it from foreign particles, humidifies, and also brings the air to the body temperature. Exchange part is the site of actual diffusion of oxygen and CO2 between blood and atmospheric air. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column, ventrally by the sternum, laterally by the ribs, and on the lower side by the dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomically setup of lungs in the thorax is such that any change in the volume of the thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lung cavity. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. The next is respiration involves the following steps. First is breathing or pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in and CO2 rich alveolar air is released out. Second is diffusion of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, across alveolar membrane. Third is transport of gases by the blood. Fourth is diffusion of oxygen and CO2 between blood and tissues. And the last one is utilization of oxygen by the cells for catabolic reactions and resultant release of CO2. Cellular respiration is dealt in the chapter 12. Next heading is mechanism of breathing. Breathing involves two stages: inspiration, during which atmospheric air is drawn in, and expiration, by which the alveolar air is released out. The movement of air into and out of the lungs is carried out by creating a pressure gradient between the lungs and the atmosphere. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lungs, that is intrapulmonary pressure, is less than the atmospheric pressure. That is, there is a negative pressure in the lungs with respect to atmospheric pressure. Similarly, expiration takes place when the intrapulmonary pressure is higher than the atmospheric pressure. The diaphragm and a specialized set of muscles, external and internal intercostals between the ribs, help in generation of such gradients. Inspiration is initiated by the contraction of diaphragm, which increases the volume of thoracic chamber in the antero-posterior axis. The contraction of external intercostal muscles lifts up the ribs and sternum, causing an increase in the volume of the thoracic chamber in the dorsoventral axis. The overall increase in the thoracic volume causes a similar increase in pulmonary volume. An increase in pulmonary volume decreases the intrapulmonary pressure to less than the atmospheric pressure, which forces the air from outside to move into the lungs. That is inspiration. Relaxation of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles returns the diaphragm and sternum to their normal positions and reduce the thoracic volume and thereby the pulmonary volume. This leads to an increase in intrapulmonary pressure to slightly above the atmospheric pressure, causing the expulsion of air from the lungs. That is expiration. We have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration and expiration with the help of additional muscles in the abdomen. On an average, a healthy human breathes 12 to 16 times per minute. The volume of air involved in breathing movements can be estimated by using a spirometer, which helps in clinical assessment of pulmonary functions. Next is respiratory volumes and capacities. First is tidal volume, TV. Volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration. It is approx 500 ml. That is, a healthy man can inspire or expire approximately 6000 to 8000 ml of air per minute. Inspiratory reserve volume, IRV. Additional volume of air a person can inspire by a forcible inspiration. This averages 2500 ml to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume, ERV. Additional volume of air a person can expire by a forcible expiration. The average is 1000 ml to 1100 ml. Next volume is residual volume, RV. Volume of air remaining in the lungs even after a forcible expiration. This averages 1100 ml to 1200 ml. By adding up a few respiratory volumes described above, one can derive various pulmonary capacities which can be used in clinical diagnosis. That is inspiratory capacity, IC. Total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. This includes tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. It is TV plus IRV. Second is expiratory capacity, EC. Total volume of air a person can expire after a normal inspiration. This includes tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume. It is TV plus ERV. Functional residual capacity. Volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. This includes ERV plus RV. Vital capacity. The maximum volume of air a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. This includes ERV, TV, and IRV, or the maximum volume of air a person can breathe out after a forced inspiration. Total lung capacity, TLC. Total volume of air accommodated in the lungs at the end of a forced inspiration. This includes RV, ERV, TV, and IRV, or vital capacity plus residual volume. So student, that's all for now. We will deal more topics in the next lecture. So if you like my video, then please like, share and subscribe my channel, and thank you so much.